Supreme Commander Han stood aboard his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the battle data scroll across his viewing screen. His four eyes blinked in confusion. The mathematics were clear. The outcome was certain, yet something impossible was happening on the planet below. The Empire had conquered 17 star systems in the past decade. Every species they encountered followed the same pattern. Once defeat became obvious, they surrendered. This was logical. This was sensible. This was the natural order of intelligent beings who understood when further resistance meant only death. But the humans were not following this pattern. 3 standard rotations ago, the invasion fleet had arrived at Earth, their forces numbered in the millions. Their warships darkened the skies of major cities. Their weapons technology was 500 years more advanced than anything humanity possessed. The initial strikes had been devastating. Military bases across the planet had been reduced to smoking craters. Communication networks had collapsed. Power grids had failed. The human governments had fractured and scattered. By every measurement they used, the war was over. They had won. Commander Han transmitted the standard surrender demand. He expected the humans to accept within hours. Every other species had done so. They had surrendered in minutes. The Empire had lasted 2 days before their leaders begged for mercy. Even the warrior clans had recognized the futility of resistance after seeing their fleets destroyed. But the humans sent no response. Instead, something strange began happening across the planet. Small groups of human soldiers who should have been dead continued attacking positions. Civilians who had no military training picked up weapons from fallen soldiers and joined the fight. Cities that had been declared secured suddenly erupted in violence as humans attacked from basements, rooftops, and underground tunnels. Han called a meeting of his senior commanders in the war room of the flagship. The holographic display showed the planet rotating slowly below them. Red markers indicated active resistance points. There were thousands of them. "Explain this to me," Han demanded. His voice carried the cold authority of someone who had never lost a campaign. "Their military is destroyed. Their leaders are dead or hiding. They have no supply lines, no reinforcements, no hope of victory. Why do they continue fighting?" Strategic Commander stepped forward. She was the finest military mind in the fleet. Her calculations had never been wrong. "Supreme Commander, we have analyzed their tactical situation extensively. The humans have suffered 93% casualties among their organized military forces. Their ammunition supplies are nearly depleted. They possess no weapons capable of penetrating our shield technology. By every metric we use to measure combat effectiveness, they are defeated." "Then why are we still taking casualties?" Han's voice rose with frustration. "We lost 600 soldiers in the past rotation alone. 600, against an enemy that should have surrendered days ago." Or's expression showed the same confusion that had infected the entire command staff. "We do not understand it, Supreme Commander. Their behavior defies all logical analysis." The viewing screen switched to show footage from a ground engagement in what the humans called Europe. A small group of human soldiers, perhaps 20 in number, had fortified a position inside a damaged building. They were surrounded by 3,000 warriors with heavy weapons. The outcome was never in doubt. The commander on the ground had offered them the chance to surrender. The humans had responded by shooting one of his officers. The assault began. Plasma weapons tore the building apart piece by piece. The humans fell back, floor by floor, still fighting. When their weapons ran empty, they used knives. When their knives broke, they used their hands. When they could no longer stand, they crawled toward the enemy and continued attacking. The last human soldier in that building killed 3 warriors with a piece of broken metal before being overwhelmed. She had been missing an arm. She had been bleeding from a dozen wounds. She had known with absolute certainty that she was going to die, and she had kept fighting anyway. Han watched this footage in silence. Around him, his commanders shifted uncomfortably. None of them could explain what they were seeing. "Pull up the cultural database on humans," Han ordered. The screen filled with information gathered from intercepted human communications and captured data systems. They had studied humanity before the invasion. They had analyzed their military capabilities, their political structures, their technology levels. But they had paid little attention to human history and psychology. Why would they? All species were fundamentally the same when faced with overwhelming force. Now Han read through the historical records with growing unease. He learned about a place called Thermopylae, where 300 human warriors had held a mountain pass against an army of hundreds of thousands. They had all died. They had known they would die. They had fought anyway, not to win, but to slow the enemy and give their people time to prepare. He learned about something called the Warsaw Uprising, where human civilians had risen against a conquering force with almost no weapons, almost no training, and almost no hope. They had fought for 2 months before being crushed, but they had fought. He learned about a concept the humans called last stands. Throughout their history, human soldiers had chosen death over surrender when they believed in their cause strongly enough. They had a saying for it: "Better to die on your feet than live on your knees." Han did not understand this. Neither did his commanders. In culture, survival was the highest priority. A battle lost was simply a calculation gone wrong. There was no shame in recognizing defeat and preserving yourself to fight another day. But humans seemed to believe something different. They believed that some things were worth dying for. They believed that the manner of their death mattered as much as whether they lived. They believed that fighting impossible odds was somehow noble, even when victory was impossible. "This is madness," Commander Orr whispered. "They are throwing away their lives for nothing." Han was not so certain anymore. He watched another battle recording. This one came from a region called Asia. A human military commander named Wei had been trapped with the remnants of her battalion in a valley surrounded by forces. She had been offered surrender terms that would have guaranteed the survival of herself and her soldiers. She had refused. The recording captured her final transmission to her scattered forces across the planet. "They want us to give up. They want us to accept that this is over, but it is not over. It is not over until the last one of us stops fighting. And when that last one falls, another will take their place. They can kill us all, but they cannot defeat us, because defeat only happens when you stop fighting, and we will never stop." Her battalion had held the valley for 4 days. They had killed thousands of warriors. When they finally fell, every single soldier was dead. Not one had surrendered. Not one had tried to escape. They had fought until their bodies could no longer move. Han felt something he had never experienced before: doubt. The conquest had been based on a simple assumption: overwhelm the enemy with superior force, demonstrate that resistance is futile, and accept their surrender. This had worked on 17 species. It had worked because all intelligent beings understood mathematics. When defeat was certain, continuing to fight was irrational. All intelligent beings chose survival over death. But humans were different. They did not fight because they believed they could win. They fought because they believed in something beyond survival. They fought for their families, their homes, their way of life. They fought because surrender meant accepting that everything they loved would be controlled by another. And to them, that was worse than death. Reports continued flowing into the command center. A human resistance cell in North America had destroyed a supply depot, killing 200 soldiers. A group of human children had been discovered trying to sabotage a landing craft. Human medical workers were treating wounded resistance fighters in secret hospitals despite knowing that capture meant execution. The humans were not winning. They could not win. They had too many soldiers, too many ships, too much technology. Eventually, every human resistance fighter would be dead. This was mathematical certainty. But Han began to understand something that troubled him deeply. Killing all the humans would take years. It would cost hundreds of thousands of lives. And even then, the last human alive would still be fighting. They would never surrender. They would never accept defeat. They would die one by one until none remained, and every single one of them would go down fighting. The Empire had never faced anything like this. Their conquests had always been efficient. Surrender the enemy, establish control, move to the next target. But this conquest would not be efficient. It would be a bloodbath that lasted for years. Han looked at his commanders. He saw the same doubt in their eyes. The mathematics had changed. The conquest was still possible, but the cost had become unacceptable. Supreme Commander, or said carefully, perhaps we should reconsider our approach to this planet. Han did not answer immediately. He was watching the planet rotate below them. Somewhere down there, humans were fighting and dying at this very moment. They were outnumbered and outmatched in every way. They were being slaughtered. And they refused to stop. He thought about what it would mean to continue this war. How many would die? How many years would it take? And at the end, what would they have? A dead planet with no living humans. Was that worth the cost? More importantly, he thought about what would happen when news of this war spread to the other conquered species. Would they learn from the humans? Would they realize that surrender was not the only option? If one species could resist could others do the same? The human resistance was doing something they had never considered. It was proving that mathematics was not everything. It was proving that will and determination could matter more than numbers and technology. It was proving that some species would rather die fighting than live as slaves. Han made a decision that would shock the entire empire. "Recall our forces," he ordered quietly. His commanders stared at him in disbelief. "Supreme Commander." "Recall our forces," Han repeated. "We are leaving this system." "But we have already won," or protested. "The humans cannot defeat us. This makes no sense." Han turned to face her. His 4 eyes were tired. "We have not won anything. We have walked into a trap that we did not understand. These humans will not stop fighting. Ever. And every day we stay here, we lose more soldiers to an enemy that was supposed to be defeated days ago." He looked back at the planet. "I have conquered 17 species. I have never encountered anything like these humans. They are not logical. They do not calculate odds. They believe in something beyond survival, and that belief makes them more dangerous than any enemy we have ever faced." "We are the Empire," another commander said. "We do not retreat." Han shook his head slowly. "We are retreating because I finally understand what we are fighting. We are not fighting an army. We are not fighting a government. We are fighting an idea, and you cannot kill an idea with plasma weapons." The recall order went out to all forces on the planet. Soldiers who had been hunting human resistance fighters suddenly received orders to return to their ships. Landing craft began lifting off from cities across the globe. The humans watched in confusion as their enemy. They did not understand what had happened. They did not know that their refusal to surrender had done what their weapons could not. It had convinced them that this planet was not worth conquering. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Han watched his fleet prepare to leave. He knew he would have to explain this decision to the Imperial Council. He knew many would call him a coward. But he also knew the truth. The humans had not won because they were stronger. They had won because they could not be broken. And that was something the Empire had never learned how to defeat. As the fleet entered hyperspace and the blue planet disappeared from view, Han recorded his final observation about humanity in the Imperial database. "Do not engage, do not invade, do not provoke. These beings do not know when they are beaten, and that makes them the most dangerous species in the galaxy." The humans never knew how close they had come to extinction. They never knew that their stubborn refusal to accept defeat had saved their entire planet. All they knew was that they had fought, many had died, and somehow, against all odds, they had survived. And somewhere in the stars, the Empire spread the word. Stay away from the third planet of the Sol system. The beings there do not understand surrender, and that makes them impossible to conquer.